Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Trailblazing Leaders. I'm excited to announce that our CEO Guide to the Magnificent Manager Advantage is now going to be available on our website. It is full of information that helps inform CEOs and other senior leaders how to transform good managers into magnificent managers, those managers who increase employee engagement, retain talent, attract great talent, improve customer satisfaction, increase sales, and drive profits. I want to welcome Lisa Moore. She serves as the Chief People Officer of Yahoo and oversees Yahoo's global human resource strategy, which covers everything along the employee lifecycle, from recruiting to onboarding to employee engagement and even succession planning. Lisa is about high-performing teams. Her approach is around holding frequent one-to-one feedback meetings over traditional annual performance ratings to foster a greater sense of trust and engagement. This is something I'm very passionate about. Lisa's committed to enhancing the workplace for inclusion, especially her efforts around providing opportunities for the LGBTQ+ staff and overall community. Lisa's leadership has helped Yahoo become recognized for its commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and creating a supportive environment that values mental health. Lisa, I want to tell you, I'm really honored to have you. Please join me and welcome to this episode of Trailblazing Leaders. Clearly, you are a trailblazer when you look at your history. Would you just start with maybe a story of how this journey unfolded for you? How did you get to the role you're at? And what drives your passion?
Sure. Thank you, Russell. It's great to meet you and wonderful to be here. So yeah, as you said, I've been with Yahoo. It's going to be 10 years, incredibly, this year. And when I think back, in a way, joining the company originally in November 2014 feels like yesterday.
Oh, wow.
Which... Of course it isn't. And when I tell you, when we talk about some of the chapters in between then and now, you may well also be exhausted. But to go right back to the beginning, you can probably hear in my accent, although I'm sitting in Manhattan, I'm English. I started with the company in London. And when I say the company, I have to qualify that by saying I joined AOL. At that time, AOL wasn't even part of Verizon yet. That came the following in the next chapter, if you will. But I joined originally because I had a background in international HR, and my job at that time was to look after the international population of the company, as was AOL. So then along comes the first big change. Verizon buys AOL.
Yep.
And, that was one experience, taking a team through that change, taking an employee base through that change, was really a huge experience. Still when I was based in London. Fast forward a couple of years, Verizon then buys Yahoo. And that's really when things get interesting. Now we have two companies coming together, and I moved to the US at the time when that integration was being planned. And really my job at that time, I've moved through quite a few jobs in my 10 years, but my job at that time was really to oversee that integration of two populations coming together. You can imagine a lot of discussions about effectively two names for every box. And so lots of discussions about talent, again, succession planning, team structures, where can we move folks? Where do we need to add resources? And that really was a huge experience again. We're now middle of 2017. And I moved to the States with my husband, my two kids, and a dog at that time.
Oh, that's easy. Such an easy move.
So yeah, just, wasn't busy enough at work. And really then for the next 4 years, integrating two companies together, that's all about culture, right? It's all about culture. It's all about the people. It's about communication. It's about leadership communication, to get messages down into the business. Everybody's struggling to navigate what is a brand new entity at this point.
Yeah.
And that was still under Verizon. Pandemic, blip.
Yes.
But coming out in, I guess, the second year of the pandemic, Apollo Global Management buys the company from Yahoo. And so now we're moving away from Verizon. So now we're moving away from Verizon and into a new ownership structure, an extremely different environment under private equity ownership, and in comes a new CEO. So Jim Lanzone, you mentioned in our intro there, he came in from Tinder and he's been running the company now for 2.5 years. And so when he arrived, lucky for me, he was looking for somebody with a lot of dynamism and energy, and that's pretty much me.
Yes, that is clear.
Because again, like, this is a long journey that we're in. A lot more change happened already under Jim, and will continue to happen. And I think whilst across his leadership team, he was looking specifically for domain expertise to be really honed in the areas of Yahoo Sports, Yahoo Finance. I think where I brought benefit to him was having some historical knowledge, understanding a lot of where people were, I think, emotionally on the journey that the company had been on with all this change. And then really being able to settle down a new leadership team and start developing a new culture, or an evolved culture, as what is now called Yahoo again. So that's a potted history of how I come to sit in this seat. I was promoted in June 22 into the role of Chief People Officer.
So Lisa, your career over these years has been about culture integration, consistent culture change. I'm assuming fear, worry, uncertainty of the employees. I'd like to let's start at this piece and go back just a little bit, and then we'll go forward. One is, what now is the remit between you and your new CEO? You know, he wanted the domain expertise. You have the experience where you're managed 13 countries, 11,000 people. What is he asking for from you now?
Yeah, it's a great question. And to take a step back and consider that for a second, you know, I'm thinking, I'm pretty sure I know what he's after. But of course, I will ask him again after this. Look, I think he comes in, again, with a wealth of experience in business, ups and downs. And he's at the core, he's a people person. He calls himself a product person, but he has amazing instincts when it comes to people. He's done a lot of thinking about talent management, especially hiring the right, I would say, not the right person because there are wrong people, but I'll tell you what he has in the forefront of his mind is 4 characteristics he's looking for. And it leads with domain expertise. Domain expertise, especially in a moment in time in a company like this, it's not it for every role, especially not senior roles, a place where you can be learning the trade on the job. You know, we need people who can hit the ground running, probably who've done it before or some iteration of it before. And so domain expertise that means that you can see very quickly what's working, what's not working, and where to take it is number 1. Number 2 is EQ. So being a good teammate, being able to understand people, being able to relate to people is number 2. Low ego, again, collaboration, thinking of us as one team would be number 3, and then passion for what we do, right? Having a passion for the product. And in my case, yes, I'm a user of Yahoo products, but I'm also a fierce user of my own team's products, which sometimes can be a bit annoying for them, but it usually gets us to a spot where a kink has already been eliminated, or we've thought of a question that's bound to come up next, you know, that kind of trying and testing of your own product. So those would be the 4 characteristics Jim's looking for from, frankly, most people in the business, if not everybody. I think for me particularly, the way, again, he has these strong people instincts, so he doesn't need me coming in and telling him what people are thinking. He already knows that. We have some healthy debate about where we think individuals might be from a needing coaching or excelling or what they're doing with their own team's perspective, you know, and then we bounce ideas off each other, and then usually we decide, like, you go speak with that person, you go speak with... So we sort of tag team, I think, on that side of things. But I think more, he's, again, looking for me. Think about all those 4 characteristics combined. It's a given I should know how to do the X's and O's, as you call it, of HR. And of course, I have a team that also brings expertise, whether it's reward or operational excellence or recruiting or business partnering. But But I think being a partner to Jim is very much eyes and ears and feeling how the company is doing, and then helping him to sort of get into any areas that perhaps need him to lean in a bit closer from a coaching perspective.
So what I hear is your leader comes with a strong people intuition. He knows the growth of the business is by hiring the right people in the right role that have the expertise already for growth and acceleration. How did the two of you develop the trust to debate the issues? Because, you're talking billions of dollars, and he's looking for candid response, and maybe that's always been who you are, but trust between the most senior leader and yourself is crucial. How did that develop?
Yeah. Two things come to mind, Russell. Before Jim was introduced as the CEO, so we're now, let's call it August, September of 2021. So we're a year and a half into the pandemic. And the company prior to Jim, as I said, we were under Verizon, and then we know we're moving under Apollo. And Apollo is a company that was leaning very heavy into RTO, returning to the office as soon as they could. And they wanted to go in pretty much 5 days a week, right? It's sort of a banking type of culture. Whereas us as a media and tech company, one, prior to the pandemic, it wasn't a 5 day a week in the office.
Yep.
And two, during the pandemic, lots of people have moved to different locations. We've hired folks in different locations and also closed offices, frankly, near where we used to have offices. So now people are remote because we closed the office. So the idea that for us, we would pivot back to 4 days a week in an office, or you have to leave the company, to me was just, what are we doing? But we were getting sucked into that because we didn't have a strong conviction from a culture and an employee engagement perspective. Mm-hmm. And so I was getting extremely frustrated. One weekend, my husband remembers this very vividly. I had done so much research. And of course, everybody's sending me 25 articles a minute about RTO and post-pandemic and flexible working and how it's going to be a disaster. And I literally wrote a paper. I just had to get everything out of my head. And I wrote a paper. And I was trying to socialize that with the prior CEO, but he was so thinking, I need to do what Apollo want, that we weren't getting anywhere. And we were on the cusp of announcing a 4 day a week back to the office, which I had such consternation about.
Yes.
And real dread about, frankly. We were going to, remember, it was on the way to the Great Resignation. So people are choosing where they want to go, and we're going to put this barrier in front of them. Anyway, one of the first things that came up when I was introduced to Jim, and it was over email, somebody said, here's Lisa, she's the author of our Future of Work paper. And, summary is blah, blah, blah. And this thing was 18 pages long. And I sent it to Jim. And I know Jim now well enough to know he didn't even open that document. He just wrote back straight away, you're going to find me a fierce component of flexibility and trust, and let's get going. Like, this is going to be amazing. And that, he's not somebody he wants detail, but he doesn't need you to present, presentations of 30 pages to make your argument. So I think between us, there was an immediate chemistry of no BS, like, let's get to the point. What are you seeing? What am I seeing? He's extremely well read. He spends time every single day listening to podcasts, reading articles. It's incredible the amount of information and pop culture, frankly, he has in his head. And it always lends itself to a good debate. And from the trust perspective, sure, he might have thought, yeah, that was a good idea, run with it. Building trust, in my experience, you have to have had a couple of testy conversations to know that you can come out on the other side, both smiling, and maybe even referring back to those conversations in hindsight and saying, remember that time when you came in really hard with that idea? And we've had a few of those on both sides. But Jim is somebody who you feel immediately doesn't have any hidden agenda. He's also very direct. So he's not looking to catch you out. He's not political. He's got no ego. He's just very relatable in a way. I hope he doesn't watch this because he's easy to work with if you bring the same kind of openness, transparency, and like anybody, I've been working long enough to even like now it comes easier. But in the early days, when you feel unsettled about something and you know you have to have a conversation with somebody, and usually they're more senior than you are, you've got to get yourself ready, take a deep breath,
Yep.
and just ask for some time to discuss something that isn't feeling quite right,
Yep.
you know, and then you're into the conversation. And so I think I was already mature enough in my career to be able to do that with Jim and say, hang on a second, can we just talk about this? Because it feels a bit odd. And you know, that's how
it sounds like, and I've heard this, is that the greatest leaders who build billion-dollar companies really walk the people culture. They could have all the technology, all the stuff, all the marketing, but in the end, they are honestly authentic people, businesses. And therefore, they realize the engine of the business is their people, no matter how many other bells, whistles, technology, they support that process. And clearly, Jim is one of those people. And he was trusting of you and you were trusting of him. And therefore, his EQ allowed you to match his. And so that, I think that's an important point. And I really appreciate you sharing that level of detail. I want to move to an area that I know is an important passion. And it ties back to engagement. It ties back to RTO. It ties back to where we're all working. Let's talk about equity and inclusion and diversity and that entire topic of I don't need to hide. I think I read one of your quotes. Imagine you having to hide every day when you come to the office and how bad that would feel if you're really pretending. So I'm going to give you free rein to talk about how you approach it, what you do, how that has become culture and the acceptance around that.
So yeah, and thank you for doing that, for giving me the space to speak about it. I mean, even as you're saying that, Russell, and I think it was a couple of weeks ago for Trans Day of Visibility that I posted that. But it may have been a previous year post similarly. But when you think about that statement, you know, imagine if you had to cover something every day, or pretend to be somebody else every day, or not disclose something about yourself. You know, really, I think for me, since I came in hot and heavy into the space of DEI, you know, pretty militant, I've also softened to the degree that I recognize everybody has something that they're either covering or they don't want to talk about, or they feel awkward about, or they feel they'll be judged about. And that could be a socioeconomic background. It could be a physical disability that maybe isn't visible. You can't see it, but I have it. And I don't want to tell you I have it because you might think differently about me. And so, you know, I think the end of the story is, for me, thinking of every individual literally as that, as an individual. There's a really great exercise that I did one time in a probably a leadership seminar. But what it was saying, you know, these are all the identities that you might attach to yourself. And really, when you list out what those things are, no two peoples look the same. And I actually added one. My parents divorced when I was 4. And I really think that's a huge part of who I am today. It's not a disability. It's not an underrepresented group, but it still means I come in to a conversation with something that I maybe do or don't want to talk about with other people. Now, to get more deliberately into the DEI space, and specifically in the workplace, in 2017, go back to that moment when Yahoo and AOL merged. I think there were some ERGs on the Yahoo side. They were very nascent on the AOL side. So we combined and set up for the first time as a company then. I think there were 7 in the beginning ERGs. And I mean, I really take my hat off every single day to every single person who's involved in an ERG, because it is discretionary effort. And at the same time, it is a tremendous burden of responsibility. You know, the things that the leads of the ERGs go through, often unanticipated, but they're on the hot seat. You know, they didn't get any training for this. And perhaps they're also victims of being those discretionary effort givers. They give and they want to make a difference. And so what I love about Yahoo, and actually my partner in crime, Alison Williamson, who's the chief culture and diversity officer here, you know, she sort of looks after the ERGs. I'm an active ally member and exec sponsor of those. But her team, the way that they support the leaders is different now than I think I've seen in any other company, just in terms of the amount of investment in trying to help them to do that as though it is another job. They have to put a budget together. They have to put a comm strategy together. They have to execute on events, and so giving them support, and also just recognizing them. There's an awards ceremony for them at the end of the year.
Oh, nice. Really nice.
We try to make sure that they have as much exposure as we can on things like the company meetings that we do, not just when it's a pillar month, but throughout the year. Again, just to celebrate them, because that's a big ask. And of course, they are usually also carrying whatever it is that we're talking about, and they're experiencing this firsthand, plus they have to sort of disconnect that and be a leader of a group and facilitate a discussion, sometimes without putting their full self into the conversation, because they have to stand back a little bit.
And so what I'm hearing is we empowered our people to lead their areas. We support them. We know it's twice the work of what they're doing. And we also know how important it is to appreciate them publicly, because that's the fuel. That's the social fuel.
Yes.
The human fuel of appreciation for going the extra and knowing what they're doing is for the good of the company, the good of every individual, and helping each individual flourish. That's really our, if we can help everyone in the company flourish and be their best, then we're going to have a great company.
Yes, I think that's right. And just to add, all the ERGs have an executive sponsor / champion. And when I've been an exec sponsor and I was with our LGBTQ group, which I'm still very close to, I then transitioned and I'm working with our neurodiversity team. That has been phenomenal for me personally, to also lean into another area and be able to see how this group and this community feels connected where they do and unconnected where they don't, and see how I, especially as the leader of the people function, for example, my team owns recruiting, right? So what's the experience like for candidates who identify as neurodiverse? I can actually shortcut changes to processes that can make an impact. So that's been really powerful as well. But just to say again, the support for the ERGs also comes in the form of directs to the CEO, meeting with those leaders on a regular basis, being there for support, and to promote the cause, if you will, of what the ERG is trying to elevate.
Right. I'm sorry. I have, of course, a deer fly, which would happen in my environment, buzzing around my head. We're doing the best we can with that deer fly. I want to then, so what we have is your CEO cares. He exhibits care. He invites people in to demonstrate authentic care. I want to go to this topic of one-to-one meeting. I think the Gallup research, I'm sure you know, said 70% of engagement is from the direct manager, and the single most important thing a manager can do is have a meaningful meeting at the right frequency around career growth, and how much more that means than the annual performance review or the ratings review, of which people just feel is a burden, and it's not working, right? It's not. So maybe you could speak about your revelation about it, your rollout of it, and the truth that you've seen from actually living and doing it versus the theory that has been espoused.
Yeah. So what I will say is that we aren't fully there yet. We still have work to do. I don't want to appear like I feel we've flipped a switch and now everything is great. We're on the path. But yes, just to summarize, we did move away from, we use Workday as an HRIS, and we had got ourselves into a cycle of mid-year and year-end written reviews in Workday that everybody would do, all managers with all employees. And at the end of the year, you would be given a rating, one of 3 ratings, and that would in some way influence your annual bonus payout, which is a discretionary bonus target of base salary. And as you alluded to, I've lived this for many years and feel, as I know many managers do, incredibly burdened by what should be a lighter process, but a more valuable process in some way.
Yes.
And lots of different tools are available for this, but essentially what we were getting was individuals with pent up need to talk about their achievements and where they want to get to, writing, taking time to put enormous effort into writing long essays about what they had done. And then managers feeling anxious about being able to do justice to that in terms of a response. And around that time, we didn't really have any feedback tools other than you picking up the phone and trying to speak to people who your team member might have interacted with throughout the year. So lots of emotion, a very emotive process. And this was kicking off in October with promotion nominations. Then we would get into self-evaluation, manager evaluation, promotion calibrations, decisions about promotions, comp planning. I mean, the whole thing went on for 6 months.
Yes. Yeah, and it's already for the new year already.
And then you go, oh, and then it starts up again. And honestly, at the end of the day, Russell, I don't think people were getting, universally, they weren't getting consistently useful, valuable, actionable feedback through that mechanism.
Yep.
Nor, at the end of the day, through the comp planning process with 3 ratings and without some sort of forced distribution curve, which again, we didn't really want to do that. But there was also very little opportunity to differentiate financial reward for an extraordinary contribution the year before, because more or less everybody who got a on-track rating was expecting 100% of their bonus target. And you just that just doesn't add up.
Nope.
So we were stuck with this process, but because we didn't have an alternative, and perhaps it wasn't the right, certainly we couldn't have done it under Verizon because we had to basically follow the Verizon processes then. But when we became a smaller company, private again, and with Jim on board, he's always looking for, like, what are the best ideas you have, reducing friction, helping people get on with their jobs rather than spending time in admin world. And for me, this has been a long running argument I've had. I just don't think this is working. And so we took the plunge. We decided we weren't going to use ratings.
Yeah.
And instead, what we would do is have a much more regular approach to feedback and check-ins. And so for me, check-ins and the way that we talk about them is check-ins are about making sure that you are working on the right things, which can change, by the way, week to week and certainly month to month and certainly year to year. You don't want to wait a year to find that out, that you've been working on the wrong thing. And then checking in on how you're doing. We've got a lot of people who are working flexibly. They're not seeing the manager in person. They're not often with other teammates. Are they doing okay? Do they need anything? Do they need, how can we help them? How can we help them continue to feel attached to the team and attached to the work? So that check-in, which really is what we were saying, worry less about the annual, make sure you're having a regular check-in. Again, we're not going to prescribe it. We're not going to mandate a weekly because we have lots of engineers in the business, as well as marketers and editors, and things can work differently for different people. We trust you that you will be doing check-ins. And if you're an individual and you're not having a check-in with your manager, put your hand up and say, I know I'm entitled to a check-in, and make sure it happens, And so that touch point, which I understand most of the time that's going to default to working items, but it's also our job as the people team and through the business partners to re-emphasize, yes, it's about work. It's also about just checking in on your teams and making sure that that they're okay.
So did you add to that, or do you plan to add to that, their career growth? Because what they're I'm glad you worry about my health. Of course, it's the manager's job to make sure I'm on task and on point. But the great manager, what I call the magnificent manager, is a career coach, a talent grower. And so if I haven't listened to where you want to go to, and we're not having meetings discussing how I'm helping you in your personal career growth, whatever that might be, that my experience is that's the gap. How do you address that piece of this one-to-one?
Yeah, so I think that it is, again, we're balancing prescribing solutions and encouraging and trusting and giving guidance to managers. So our expectation is that at least once a year now, if not twice a year or quarterly. I know certainly on my team there's a variety of approaches, but I know one team does this quarterly. That's what they talk about specifically in terms of growth. And this is also where I think domain experts. So what do we mean when we say career growth? What we've really been trying to do for the last couple of years is break down what growth means and try and move it away from, I want to get promoted. I've been here in my role for 3 years. It's about time I got promoted. And unpicking that and saying, okay, let's talk about contribution. What level are we operating at? And let's look at the person who sits next to you who's the level above. Like, what's different about that? How would you get there? What does decision-making look like at their level? What does autonomy, what am I expecting that person to bring in terms of additional ideas through external research or, strategic analysis that they've done that you're not doing? And let's bridge those gaps. And again, companies can get really, really bogged down in job ladders and skill matrices, and I don't believe that can substitute a meaningful qualitative discussion with somebody about what they're doing and how it compares to somebody at the level above. But to do that, the manager has to be a domain expert themselves. So again, we're getting back into what makes a magnificent manager. I'm going to pick up that book and read it, actually. What makes a magnificent manager? Like they need to be able to say these technical skills, and here's the not the gap in you, but the gap there is to get to the next level. And then looking at the individual and pulling out their strengths and what strengths are going to lend themselves to the next level up from a seniority perspective, and or where there might be, again, areas they need to lean in. I was having a conversation this morning, actually, I won't disclose the name, but one of my peers who needs to find another way of effectively communicating so as to be able to influence the CEO on something. And so we're talking a bit about that bucket of influencing skills. So have you thought about And then, that to me, when you're talking about growth, that's how you grow. And then it becomes obvious that you are to be considered at the next level. And again, because although we're a new company, we're also an old company, and we have some amazing employees, teams, groups of teams who've been here for a long time, and they're used to more of a, I'll be here a while, I'll get promoted kind of culture. Whereas here really is about bringing a contribution, demonstrating curiosity. I love nothing more than when somebody comes to me and says, I read this article and I think we could deploy it like this in this way at Yahoo, and this would be what would happen. To me, I'm like, that's potential in action.
Yeah. So from my chair is the responsibility of the manager as we go to the new workforce and a new workplace with new generations, and just knowing we're going to have assisted technologies, whatever they might be. The skill of that manager of caring about the people means every manager is a human relationship manager. It's not, I'm really just an engineer and I'm a really good marketer. No, if you get the title of, quote, manager, you have to be a people person, because you have to have these authentic conversations of, are you okay? What do you need? How do you compare to where you want to go to? Maybe you're really just comfortable in your role as a great individual contributor and you just need us to deal with comp, but not a title change. Maybe you're not a people person, but you think that is that issue. And so I think that I have seen this complexity between, I do 9 box, but I'm supposed to be in the top right. Well, no, not everybody's supposed to get there. And so I think the managers of tomorrow have a much deeper job than just the expertise of their unit function. Yeah. And that we're all human relationship managers as we move forward. Yes. And I think my personal passion with you is I want everyone to unleash the potential of every employee, to allow them to flourish by finding their magnificence. I think you talked about how everybody is unique. And to me, I say, well, that means everybody is magnificent. Our job is to unleash that magnificence, but we can't do it if we're self-centered or unaware or just worried about the task at hand.
Yeah. No, I think that's exactly right. And again, the art of talent management is not only recognizing that everybody has unique characteristics and skill sets that are derived and built on who they are as people, but it also has to be the case that that's what you need in your business today too. And that's,
Yes.
again,
Yes.
in an environment like we're in, where things are changing a lot, we're a company on a mission. We're trying to realize Yahoo for the brand it deserves to be, right? And that is exactly what you're talking about. The manager, we put people in managerial roles because they ascend technically with technical brilliance. I think when I said to you that we are not all the way there yet, we've stopped doing performance ratings and we've been running with check-ins for coming up on a year. And we're running campaigns to make sure that people are having check-ins. It's a simple 1-question pulse. We send it out in Slack, so we meet them where they are. And it is, have you had a check-in recently with your manager? And what we're trying to do is not police this, but allow us to see where managers might be struggling, where this isn't a current practice. And then we can go and lean in with the business partner team and say, hey, help us understand what's in the way of this and give you, whether it's talking points or role model with you, put you in a workshop where we're talking about what it means to have a conversation with somebody. Because a lot of people, my husband's an engineer, like they'd rather avoid those conversations. But yet you are an engineering manager. There's no way you cannot do that job.
No.
Now, what I would love to do, and it's a little bit radical, but it's almost like an amnesty on managerial responsibilities. I'd almost like to be able to say to the manager population, if you're not enjoying it, tell us, right? We won't dock your pay, but we will make sure that you are then deployed with your technical brilliance on projects as an IC. And if, by the way, that's not you and you love your managerial responsibilities, put your hand up in this direction, because we're going to invest heavily in you to make sure that you've got all the tools and resources available. And that would probably be a shortcut to operational efficiency in the sense that we'd have fewer managers. I think every company grows and grows and grows, and they have too many managers as one way to do it.
I do love that topic because by old legacy methods, you have people who are struggling because they're just not that people person. And that's okay. But we have made it not okay. And so I love the amnesty. I love that as a potential idea, given we're just coming to such a new workforce, and whatever we were doing 5 years ago and definitely 10 years ago is out of date. For retention and passion and productivity, engagement and inclusion. Got to change. I want to give us a closing opportunity here, which is, you have so much experience and wisdom. What would you say to the trailblazing leader coming up behind you? To those rising up, if you had 3 bits of wisdom to leave them with, what are those bits of wisdom you want to share?
Wow. Well, thank you for calling me a trailblazer and having me on the show. I don't often look at myself that way, but it's very flattering and humbling. Advice to others. It's easy to say this when you get to my stage of career. But what I've said to my kids, and I say to my team as well, is most of what we're doing, we can quickly reverse if it doesn't work. So don't get stuck in something just because it's always been done. I think questioning the status quo, the why we're doing it, what would happen if we didn't do it, that curiosity will set you up well. It'll also mean, just to channel back a few minutes into our conversation, when you're thinking that way and you bring different perspectives, different ideas, other folks will spot that too. We've all been in meetings where there's a presentation and then there's a Q&A, but there's actually no Q. And then the presentation finishes and everybody seemingly goes away and they've just accepted everything they were told, but they're probably not going to do anything with it because they didn't really believe it, but they didn't ask the question. So again, going back to the fact that I'm a child of divorced parents meant I moved a lot of schools when I was younger. But it means that I have no hesitation in a room of people I don't know to put my hand up and ask a question. And that isn't going to be where everybody's been brought up, right? But try to be brave and ask a question, because that gets you noticed. I think the other thing I'll say, I'll just channel Barack Obama. Learn how to get things done. Get things done. Get things done. Get things done. And again, there's nothing more gratifying than somebody completing what they said they were going to do before you had to follow up and do it. So, and then read, listen. I think a lot of us just get stuck where we are, the company we've been in, the companies we used to be in. When you bring folks in, make sure you listen to what they know from where they came from and expand your network, and then speak to other people about what they're doing, and just continue to learn and try things. Those probably would be my 3 bits.
Okay. So a curious mind, the courage to ask questions, the ability to get it done, do the fundamentals, and continually expanding your mind, listening and looking for other opinions besides your own. Beautiful advice. Lisa, I thank you so much for our time today. I enjoyed our conversation immensely, and I appreciate you sharing your knowledge, your wisdom, and you being vulnerable and being magnificent with me. So thank you so very much.
Thank you, Russell.
So on this episode of Trailblazing Leaders, Lisa talked about some really important points that I hope you take away with and make note of. One is the relationship she has with the CEO and the collaboration that they've been able to form, and the trust bonds to be able to talk about the difficult conversations. I think it was really important that Lisa shared that her CEO walks the talk of people and culture, that they look to hire individuals with high EQ, low egos, that come with domain expertise in a collaborative manner. And so that's a great one to reflect upon, which is that me? Is that my team? Is that my leadership? I think the other thing is that Lisa has gained wisdom from going through 4 major cultural transformations and integrations over her career, from AOL to Yahoo to Verizon to then out to private equity, and has handled all of those with grace and passion and expertise. In our conversation, we talked about the fact that to be a manager doesn't mean you're a technical manager, an expertise to get it done, but that the manager of today is a human manager. Everybody's in the human relationship business, which means it's important to create connection, to listen, to be vulnerable, to share stories, and to understand where people are, what's getting done, what they need, and where do they want to go to. And one of the things that Lisa is about and passionate, and so am I, is about this aspect of the one-to-one conversation, what I call the career coaching conversation, the connected conversation that is not about the task that done and the project for tomorrow, but it's about how can I help you bring out your best? How can I help you become unbounded, to maximize your human potential, to flourish in the workplace? What is it that is your purpose? What is our purpose? And how do we bring those together? And that can only happen with managers who are willing to spend the time and care and recognize the opportunity of connecting with everyone that they're responsible to develop and manage and lead. So I really thank Lisa for sharing her expertise and her wisdom on this episode of Trailblazing Leaders. And I want to remind all listeners to go to the Kern & Partners website, where they can download our new e-guide, The Magnificent Manager Talent Advantage. It's rich with content. It's going to talk about the 3 areas of focus to make you a magnificent manager, and the 12 behaviors that you'll want to practice to gain the competitive advantage. So get that guide by going to kernandpartners.com. I'm sure you're going to enjoy the guide. please go visit Kern & Partners now. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Trailblazing Leaders podcast. If you want to check out more episodes, you're going to find them on all major streaming platforms such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and of course, YouTube. The podcast is also available at our website at kernandpartners.com. Thank you for being with us today, and we'll see you on our next episode.